Hey readers, welcome back to Reading Realm. I have a pug down here and he wants all the attention right now. Um, but I am reviewing the third book in the amazing series by Stephanie Garber. This is A Curse for True Love. Absolutely amazing. If you have not watched my reviews for the first two in the series, I highly recommend checking those out first. But this series is so good. I finished it, I think, 2 nights ago, and I want more. I finished this book, and like half an hour after I finished it, I was like, I'm gonna go back and read more because I want more. And then I was like, wait, no, but it's over. And it's like, it was so good and had me so invested that I forgot that I couldn't just go back to it and get more. But I did find out at the end of this book, this is not a plot spoiler, this is just an interesting thing. Apparently, there are different extended endings based on what edition of the book you have, which I think is really, really fascinating, and I'm really curious about what some of the other endings are. So the end of this actually has like a bonus story that's exclusive to this particular version of this book. So like this cover, this format, everything has a specific story, and then there's a couple others, which I think is so cool because in this series there's the whole story curse thing where stories are always getting changed and the endings are getting warped and the details are getting twisted and all that. And the author, not the character, the author in her explanation of the different endings was talking about how this is the perfect series to do multiple endings with, because it's like these books have the story curse, where if you get the Barnes & Noble one, you get a different bonus ending than like a different publisher or a different distributor's version's ending, which I think is just such a fun idea. I love that. It's very fun. This one has a really funny little short story at the end, which was just amusing to kind of see what ended up happening to one of the characters that kind of doesn't actually appear in this third book, but was definitely prevalent in the first 2 books. But anyway, the third book is so good. The second one left me really, really, really angry with a certain character. He had no right to do that. How dare he? But it makes what happens and like the perspective in the third book very, very, very interesting. Also, I mentioned this at the end of my review of the second, but the first 2 books in the series are all from Evangeline's perspective. And this book actually is from 3 perspectives, which I think is really interesting because for the first time you get to see not just Evangeline's perspective, but also Apollo's perspective and Jack's perspective. And it's very, very interesting to see their perspectives because the things that I need to be so careful how I word this. The things that Apollo is pretending to do and also saying about Jax are almost the opposite of Jax's actual actions or intentions. And it's so interesting. And it's also just, I love getting sort of more of the insight into those characters, particularly Jax, because it's been really strongly implied for a while in the other books that the words that he says are usually not what he actually means, and whether that's a manipulation thing or whether that's whatever reason, like, he's not being honest with what he says. You get more of the background of why, and you get more of the, like, what he's actually thinking and feeling when he's saying the opposite of what he means sometimes, which I think is so interesting. Also, with Apollo, you see how what he's saying is what's happening is also not always what's happening. And I'm being careful because I don't want to say or react to anything in a way that will give away my opinions of Apollo right now, but it's so interesting. I have a pug, so I'm scratching him because he wants attention, so I'm a little bit distracted by that, but this book is so good. I also just think it's so interesting having, I think it was well done what happened to her at the end of the second book, which I'm being really careful about saying this, kind of allowed for more, reminders of plot points in the second book, like, that thing where authors, when they're starting another book in a series, they kind of try to recap some details, especially if there's stuff that, might not be as remembered, especially because I have all of this series at once, but I feel like a lot of times with series, there's, like, a year or months or years between, one being published and then the next in the series being published sometimes, so it's kind of common for an author to try and, like, refresh the reader's memory without being like, remember, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and so because of how the second book ended, I think it was a really clever way to be able to be more justified doing more of that, which I think is fun. Like, Petra is a character in the second book, which I feel like she's a very, very, very important character, but she's only there for a couple chapters. Like, she's not a super prominent character in terms of how much she's in the book, but she's very important. And there is a part where there's, like, a little refresher of who she is for the reader, but it's filled in really organically with the way that the book is written, which I have to be so careful talking about this because I really don't want to spoil what happened, because it's kind of a major plot twist. But I think it's also just very, very, very interesting because it is this sort of, not ethical exactly, but, like, the question of good and evil are so gray in this series, and I feel like in the whole series, but especially in this one, like, there's the sort of villain, I would honestly say at the end of the series, and even before, I feel like I don't think of Jax as a villain. I see him as an anti-hero more, because I feel like he, especially in this last book where you do get to see more of his perspective, he's such a complicated character, and I do think, if he is a villain, which I think he technically kind of is, but he's a very sympathetic one. Like, especially when you sort of learn about his past and what's happened and what's kind of led to him being who he is now. It's very, very interesting, but it's also like, can you really hate him fully? Because a lot of this stuff was out of his control. A lot of this stuff was not his choice. A lot of this stuff kind of was done to him rather than him making the decision to be who he is now, which I think is very, very interesting. And then on the flip side, you have Apollo, who is supposed to be like the sort of Prince Charming type thing. He's supposed to be like happily ever after. He's supposed to be like perfect love story. And there's gray area with that too as well. And I could say so much more, but it would all be spoilers, so I can't. But it's definitely so interesting because it's like, I love books that question the black and white good and evil. I love books where the way that a character portrays themselves publicly is really different than who they really are, especially when it's in a way where you can see from their perspective what they're doing. And in this case, that goes for both the good character and the bad character, and I'm putting those in quotes because what you see from their perspective might reverse your opinion of which one is good and which one is bad. I will say I definitely think that every character in this series, not just the 3 that I've mentioned by name, or 4 that I've mentioned by name, all of them, I feel like, have some level of good and some level of evil, or bad, even if it's not, like, full evil. It's a spectrum on all of them. Like, I would say the protagonist overall is more good than bad, but some of the things that she has done are questionable. Same with Jax. He's portrayed to be the villain, but also he has saved the protagonist several times. And even before this book, like, he has done that. And then with Apollo, I'm sure there's stuff where he has done genuine good things. He's been, like, kind and stuff, but then he's also done some pretty messed up stuff too. So, and part of that also is Apollo's been cursed like 4 times, but which I guess could almost be a spoiler. Well, that is kind of a spoiler, but yeah. I'll debate whether I need to cut that out or not. Hopefully, if you're to this review, you've heard the other 2 reviews. So that's why I'm being a little bit more open about certain things than in those earlier ones. But also, just go read this series. It's really good. But, yeah, I also think that it's very, very, very interesting how there's a character in this book who pretty much is only in this book. Like, she's mentioned in other books, and you see her at the very, very end of the second book. But as an actual active character, she's kind of only in this one. And her motives are so interesting to me. Like, it's such a fascinating character to show up in the last book and just kind of be doing all this chaotic stuff where she's, like, kind of the catalyst for a lot of stuff. She is kind of, I don't really understand what she gets out of a lot of it, is the thing that's really interesting about her. There's, like, one thing she does where it's like, yeah, I mean, like, that kind of makes sense why you would do that, but it's just, it's very, very interesting. I also have to say, the ending of this book, I cannot say what it is, because obviously that would be a huge spoiler, but it is so satisfying. I had to tell my mom the whole setup to the end of this book and then talk to her about it, because I was like, if I don't get this out before I record this, I will not be able to talk about this without spoiling it. The end is so satisfying. I saw it coming, how a certain thing was gonna work with a tree. That's all I'm saying about that. The evil tree, not the good tree. There's two magic trees. But I saw what was gonna happen. I was like, I know what's gonna happen here. And it did, which was satisfying that I was right, but also just the way it was written. Oh, it's so satisfying. I love when characters get what they deserve. And it is really, really satisfying too, because not only did that character get what they deserve, but also other characters get, I think, what they deserve, mostly. It's a little bit hard to say that without spoiling things too much, but I do feel like the ending was, like, well earned for the characters, I feel like, on both, whether their ending was good or bad. I think that the actions of the characters justified what ending they got, which I think makes it so satisfying, because it's like the characters who have suffered a lot and who have gone through a lot, they kind of got a more peaceful, like, you deserve this, you've done a lot of good stuff, you've tried to change for the better, whatever it is, like, they get an ending where it's like, that's a good ending for this character. And then on the flip side, the characters who are douches, specifically one person, get an ending that they really deserve as well, but it's not a good ending for them. But it's so justified. It's such a good ending, and I love it so much. I love the way that it was written. It was so satisfying. And it just, I definitely was very happy about that happening. And I'm trying so hard not to give away who I'm talking about with this, because I don't want to give away too much, but so good, so satisfying. I want more books from this author. I want to go read Caraval again. I want to read this series again after I read Caraval again. Like, oh, it's so good, I want more. I'm so sad it's over. It's also just kind of fun getting back into this author, because it is kind of nostalgic, because I did read Caraval, like, years ago, and so, it's a very similar writing style, and even though the plots are pretty different, and the characters' personalities and everything are pretty different, it's very, very interesting to have, the way that the writing style is, the way the plot twists work, all of that kind of thing. It makes me want to go read Caraval again so much. And I'm also reading Sunrise on the Reaping right now, so speaking of books that I read when I was younger and getting back into that world, oh my gosh. I'm like a third of the way through right now, and it is emotionally destructive the way that people have said it was. So I'm excited to finish that one and review it too, because I feel like that is another series like with this. I have not reviewed Caraval, but I reviewed this series and it's so good. But then also I'm going to be reviewing Sunrise on the Reaping, even though I have not reviewed any other Hunger Games book. But yeah, A Curse for True Love is so good. The best ending that I could have hoped for. I have like a couple questions. There's a few characters that I kind of wonder what happens to them, which I feel like they're not really major characters, so it's not super consequential what happened to them, but it's like they were a character in this that it's like, they haven't been mentioned in a while. Like, I wonder what happened. And then on the other hand, there's another character who was mentioned a lot, but I kind of hope that she gets a good ending as well, because she has been kind of like a gray area character a bit. She has done some questionable things. She's kind of been mostly on the protagonist side, but there's been a few times where some stuff has happened. Being careful how I word things. But I'm curious, like, what would happen to her afterwards. And I feel like there is the potential for either a novella or a novel or maybe even a whole series spin-off based on her, which I think would be kind of interesting, because this series feels like it's kind of not really a spin-off of Caraval, but it's like it takes a character from Caraval and gives them their own story, which is not even the protagonist of the series. It's Jax. And he's kind of like, I guess, the male protagonist, but like he's kind of more of an antagonist for a lot of the series, but it's really, really interesting. And I feel like it's kind of like the potential of this potential spin-off series is like what happened with Beautiful Creatures, where there's the main series and then there's Dangerous Creatures, which is 2 books that are about Ridley instead. So I have not reviewed that series either. Also very good. But I kind of want to see a spin-off about Lala from this series, potentially, because I feel like she would be a really, really interesting character to have more about, even if it's just like a novella. I feel like that would just be really, really interesting to see, because she is a fascinating character as well. So many characters in this are so interesting, so well written. I love it. But I would be interested in seeing more in this sort of world. Also, just if she publishes more books, regardless of whether they're connected or not, I want to read them. They are so good. I am so sad that it's over. I really, really, really want to read more of it. And I feel like it's kind of putting into perspective. I have, over the last, year and a half, read a lot of murder mystery. I've read a lot of Natasha Preston. I've talked about that, how they're, unhealthily addicting to me. And I enjoy them, but fantasy is my main love. And I think that this series really put that back into perspective. Because when I review, you might have even, noticed it. When I've reviewed other books that are not this series, I've been like, here's this review, it was good, here's what I thought about it. And then this one, I'm like, I can't even contain how excited I am about this book. I cannot stop smiling when talking about this book. This series is so good. And I feel like I need more books like this. The other ones that I'm actively reading right now, I'm reading 2 more murder mystery-ish ones. I'm reading one kind of dystopian sci-fi, and then I'm reading one fantasy one right now, and then Sunrise on the Reaping, which is fantasy dystopian. So I feel like I'm reading kind of a mix right now, but this one, oh, it's so good. I want more. There is no more, and I'm sad about it, but it was perfect. The ending was so good. Just the character development, the insight to the characters from the different perspectives, all of it, so good. I also think it was done really, really well, because I feel like there's a lot of times where an author who decides to do a multi-perspective book decides to do too many different perspectives. I feel like that's what makes Game of Thrones hard for me to read. I've tried to read some of it, and it switches perspective so much. Also, in the Throne of Glass series, I feel like it was really hard for me with certain books because it would switch perspective, but it would go like maybe alternating 2 perspectives every other chapter or something, and then like every 10 it would have a different perspective that wasn't those 2, and so I'd be like, what is this? Especially if I didn't have a chance to read every day and like get through it quickly, I would completely forget about everything that happened with the one that was less prominent. And this one, it's limited to 3 perspectives, and they're all really distinct, and they're all like really interconnected too, so it's really easy to follow what's happening in all of them and not get completely lost from what's happening. It's very, like, Apollo is very different than Jax, who's very different from Evangeline. They do not kind of blend together when you're reading them. It's very clear, like, who is doing what, and a lot of it is very directly overlapped. Like, you see Apollo do something, and his perspective of why he did it, what he did, and then, like, the next chapter, Evangeline doesn't know what he did or why he did, but you see her, how what he did or why he did affects her. Same with Jax, how it affects her, how she affects him, how Apollo affects Jax, how all of it kind of interconnects. Very, very interesting, very well written, because I feel like it is such a fragile balance of giving insight into all the different characters, wanting to share the perspective of multiple characters, versus is it too much? And I think that in this case it wasn't. It was exactly how I feel it couldn't have been written better. I think it was exactly what it needed to be for the way that the book was, and I'm really glad that you have more of the perspective, because there's definitely certain things where it's like, if you didn't see Jax and Apollo's perspective, some of the stuff Evangeline never found out about, so if all of it was just her perspective, she'd never know, the reader would never know, so learning it from the other perspectives, I really, really enjoyed, but I do think it was a really good call to not have that in the first 2 books, because I think that part of what made it so good is the mystery of motives, of internal thoughts, of actual intent versus what the result is and how it impacts her. I think that keeping the reader guessing along with her in the first 2 was very good, and then the third having also just the I want to talk about it, it's a spoiler, the way that, like, Evangeline's condition in the 3rd book impacts her, I feel like makes it a lot more important for there to be the multiple perspectives, because it gives that opportunity for understanding, even when she's super confused about everything, which I'm being really careful how I word that too, because spoilers, but I've been talking about this book for half an hour. I could talk about it for hours. It's amazing. I hope everyone reads it. It is definitely probably the best series that I've read this year. So far, I have more, lots more to read, but I love it. It is so good. I really want more from this author. I really hope we get more from this author. I could not ask for a better ending, like I've said so many times, but also I couldn't ask for a better series in general. Like, I feel like it was done so well, the whole series. I feel like the pacing was really good, the plot twists were really good, the character development was really good, the characters themselves, while some of them were not necessarily good in terms of, like, motives or personality or actions, they were really well written. They were, like, good characters in terms of, like, wanting to know more, wanting to understand them, wanting to support them, wanting to be against them. All of it. It's just so good. The mystery of it, the kind of adventure, the world building of all the curses and folk tales and all of that stuff. So, so good. But I need to stop before I do talk about this for an hour. So let me know what you're reading. I hope that everyone checks this one out. So good. But if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. It really helps me out. And keep reading. Bye!